Well. Crap. Aloha. Welcome to this video. I'm going to be making a GunStock War Club. I haven't made one of these before, and so I'm going to be making two actually. So this is the first one, and I'm just going to be kind of exploring with this one. I'm really excited. I was picking which wood I want to use. I ended up going with a centerpiece. All three of these are Koa wood. I just really liked the figure and the compression curl on that centerpiece. So it's a little bit small for a GunStock War Club. Usually they're larger than this. But I really wanted to use this wood, and that was the size of the piece that I had available, so I just made the best of it as I could. The center lines that I drew on there, those are just kind of design concepts as I was going through it. I ended up making a lot of changes on this piece as I was working through. This one isn't for a specific person. I just have wanted to make one of these for a long time, and I finally have a little bit of time to work on some personal pieces. It would have been available if I didn't break it, but we'll get to that later. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making sure to mark both sides. This is so that I can keep track of some of the initial design features that I was going for. I did end up changing some of those features as I progressed through the piece, but this way I'm able to just keep track of it and make sure that I don't remove material where it's needed. I got it about, I don't know, 60% shaped before I started to work on the blade. So the blade for this piece is actually going to be a Megalodon tooth. So most of the time, GunStock War Clubs have some type of metal blade, and that's what's used for the striking end. Rather than a blade, I'm going to be using this Megalodon tooth, and I'm going to be insetting it into the piece, and I'm just going to epoxy it in, and then use probably a center core, some type of center rod to keep it in place. In order to get this out, what I did is I traced it first, and now I'm just going back and forth between my Dremel and the chisel just to bring out that wood. You'll kind of notice it here in just a little bit as it goes to the next section, but I try to keep the inside of the inset to kind of match the root of the Megalodon tooth. And I did that because I wanted it to have as much contact with the wood as I could. I didn't want it swimming in epoxy. And the other reason why I did that is I really wanted it to have a close fit, just so that it looked really good from the exterior. Everything was clean and nice. One thing I noticed right there on this edge is as I was holding it, it kind of dug into my hand. So just another design that I had originally that turned out it just didn't feel good on the hand, so I'm changing that up. So I'm really learning a lot with this first piece on how it feels, what kind of weight I want on it. I'm getting actually almost more excited as I'm working on this one for the next one, just because as I'm working through it, I have just all these different ideas that I'm thinking about that I can't really introduce into this one just because of its size. And so the next one's going to be a full-size GunStock War Club, and I'm just super excited about it. For the edge work here, I usually pull out my chisels. I do this to keep those edges nice and clean and true. It just makes it a little bit more crisp. I have done edges with my angle grinder and sanding discs and hand sanding, but I find that I just get a cleaner edge if I clean it up with the chisel and then use the angle grinder and the sanding disc to kind of just do the rest. So you can see here I'm using the angle grinder less to keep that edge clean and more just to remove some material where I wasn't with the chisel. You can start to see the grain on this wood. It's really pretty. The koa here is a compression curl, which means that it was compressed. Usually it's done on the trunk, or it's done like where a large limb meets the body. and the weight of the tree compresses it, and you can really see that with the grain, how it's waving. So I was really excited for this one. It's actually one of the reasons why I made the design choice that I did. So a lot of GunStock War Clubs have a lot of ornate and decorative designs. Because the wood on this turned out to be so beautiful, I decided to leave it a very simplistic design and just have the koa wood and the Megalodon tooth really be the highlight. And so I'm sanding it down to 320. I started at 100 grit, and I'm working my way up from 100 to 120 to 150 to 220 to 320. I followed that progression just because it was a fairly large piece and I had quite a bit of material that I still needed to remove, and so I wanted to make sure and get all of that out of the way. I have it largely shaped now. It's almost actually to a point where it's going to be finished. I still have some sanding to do, but for the most part, the overall shape and design is just about right where I want it. And so what I'm doing here is just taking the 320 and just making sure my edge work is clean. The ridges are showing up the way that I want them to. And then as soon as I get it into a good spot, I'm going to be putting in the Megalodon tooth. So what I decided to do with the Megalodon tooth, rather than having like a pin, what I decided to do is drill out where the root goes. Those two sections right there, those holes, I drilled those down about 1 inch each. And the idea there is I'm using a slow setting epoxy, so it's going to harden up really solid. So the epoxy is going to set, and I mixed in some sawdust from the koa piece just to make it blend in a little bit better. But what my thoughts are on this is the epoxy is going to adhere really well to the Megalodon tooth because it has a lot of grooves and notches, and so it really sticks well. It's going to adhere well to the wood, and those holes that I drilled in are going to act as like as spines, like a center spine, and that way it'll really be solid. So it's not going to pull out. It might break off to the side, but it won't pull out. And it actually worked out really well. It was a really solid piece. It was a lot of fun. While it was setting, it's set for about 10 hours, but right after I set it, my kids were wanting to play around, and they were trying to force me out the door, and so I was just having some fun with them. So now it's about 10 o'clock at night, actually, so I let it sit from about 10 a.m. to about 10 p.m. And I'm coming in and removing all of the excess epoxy and continuing to sand it down, and then I'm going to go ahead and sand it with a 400 grit. And I usually don't take my pieces down to 400 grit, but the koa here was just beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, and so I wanted to just smooth that off a little bit more. If it was for a client, I probably would have even taken it down to maybe even 1,000 grit, but even at just a 400, you can really see as soon as I apply the oil, oh, absolutely beautiful. Oh, this wood is just gorgeous. This is what I look forward to every piece. This is my favorite section, just because it really, up until this point, I start to see the beauty of the wood, but it really hasn't shown itself yet. And this is really where you get to see the gorgeous curl, the golden look. Koa wood is just an absolutely beautiful wood. So I went ahead and oiled the entire piece, and then like every other piece I let it sit. But I was going to wrap the handle, but the handle was so beautiful I just decided to leave it, and so this ended up being the final piece. The shape of it worked really well, the balance was really nice. Absolutely loved it. On the next piece, I am going to be wrapping the handle, but again, this was a smaller piece, and I wanted to just highlight the koa wood and the Megalodon tooth. So you can see here in the natural light, it's just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, look at those waves. It's just beautiful. Oh, I'm in love with this piece. This would have been my new zombie weapon. So each strike, I struck it quite a few times. Each strike was just absolutely devastating. the tooth stub into the ballistics gel a good 1.5 inches. I struck it from the front. I struck it left hand, backhand. Each strike, even when I kind of missed, it stabbed right in. And so I decided I wasn't going to end it with just ballistics gel. I was going to hit everything with it. So I hit it a couple more times. That last strike there just stabbed right in. Just, oh man, absolutely devastating. But I decided I'd bring the pineapple back. It's been a while. I think I even got a pumpkin, a few other things. Man, just complete damage. Ah, I love it. My kids were wanting to join in, so they were said to town, and they just went to town. Oh, too funny. So now most of these I try to get. So the pumpkin is a harder exterior. I tried to get things that were a little bit more solid. I wanted to see what it would do on solid materials. I ended up getting a half rack of ribs as well to test this on. Everything that I tested this on was just, oh man, it was beautiful. Did exactly what I wanted it to. Performed absolutely amazing. I was super excited. One of my favorite pieces, just functionally, the GunStock War Club, it just built for function. Absolutely a monster. The pumpkin here, it almost looked like it sliced it in half. What really happened is it sliced a section and then split it. And then when it hit the ground, it finished the split went all the way around. But it kind of looks like it sliced it. Not quite. So here was my favorite part. So check this out. So I've hit it here. It's hard to see. I've done this before, and I took off the plastic last time. This time I left the plastic on, and I'm happy I did. It wasn't nearly as big of a mess. It stabbed right in and just severed the ribs. Every strike was just cracking or cutting through rib. And you can actually see there, when I go to move it, you can see how the bone there is wiggling back and forth. That's because it just snapped the rib right in half. Every strike went all the way through. This is a half rack. I think it's like a $9 rack. Is the cheapest one I could find. But each hit was just devastating. I can't imagine getting struck with this piece. Oh, just unbelievably painful. Breaking ribs, slicing in every time until the end. So, I made it through all of the testing and it worked beautifully. And then I struck it on a tree just because I wanted to stick it into the tree, and then I was going to take a picture of it and use that as either the thumbnail or just because I thought it was cool. The tree I hit it against, I think I hit a knot, just solid. And I think it cracked when I was testing, and just exploded the Megalodon tooth. So, what to do with this? Oh well. I'll figure something out. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything else you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. See you next time. Aloha.